It's time for another One Soccer Hangout. Today, the Commissioner of the Canadian Premier League, David Clanachan, joins us for an in-depth look at the league, joined as always by Kurt Larson and Oliver Platt. I'm Adam Jenkins. Commissioner, thank you very much for taking the time. I know there's a lot of CPL fans across the country who are desperate for any kind of information you can provide them as we progress into what has now been a month of social distancing and physical isolation. So thank you very much for joining us. First of all, how are you and the family holding up during this pandemic?
Well, everybody's great, Adam. I mean, I think everybody's reconnecting with their roots, so to speak. But I've had more dinners with everyone around the table than I have in like months, even a couple of years, because mine are all older teenagers now, right? So, but it's good, some puzzles being built, some board games being played. It's back to the way things used to be, but it's still kind of unnerving. I think for a lot of people, it is very different. It's something that's, it's unprecedented. We've never had anything like this to deal with in the past, and kind of reminds you that there are bigger things in life than things that are just, that you're dealing with every day, right? Especially whether it's sport or whatever. There's a lot bigger things at risk here.
It's obviously a great opportunity, and I mean, I'm sure you're aware that you're in a fortunate position to be able to do so. I know there are people who are in downtown condos who can't leave. And I mean, in my case, not asking for a pity party, but I know that I'm unable to see my family because they both work in long-term care and my sister's in New Zealand. So everyone's got that situation. But having said that, I think everyone's in a position now, especially a month in, where we're like, okay, it's great to reconnect, but let's get back to real life and let's get back to normalcy because we all miss that interaction with everyone else. How do you think Kurt's holding up in social isolation, though?
I'm surprised he's still breathing. Like, I didn't think his wife could handle him for this amount of time. In fact, she's probably like tied up in the closet somewhere, and he's not telling anybody that.
She's part of she's part of our pre-production meetings, walking around with our little boy, who I'll say that has been one little benefit of this, is I've been able to be around our 9-month-old every day, all day. So I think his expectations are raised as to how often I'm going to be around moving forward. But no, that's been a good thing for everyone here.
Sure. We've been checking in on you every single day. That the routine is pretty much cemented. Not a whole lot going on, but what are you going to try and experiment with? Because we're 1 month down, and who knows how much longer to go.
Yeah, I'm still here. Actually, seeing as the commissioner is here, I've been continuing my education with one of the top minds at the CPL office. Oliver Gage is obviously working in soccer operations, and he runs a few kind of courses that you can take online in match analysis and analytics and things like that. So I've dived into a couple of those over the past few days, which has been fun.
We're not paying for those, are we?
Hey, I am.
All right, you are. Okay, good. I want to make sure it's not, you're not expensing that, are you?
No, my expense account. No, my very big expense account.
We don't have a continuing education system here at One Soccer.
So yeah, that's been fun. I recommend that to anyone who's got a bit of spare time on their hands these days.
Did you get a discount off your courses by throwing that plug in here?
I didn't, but I should ask. Eh? Good point.
All right. Now that we've loosened everybody up, let's dive into some more serious talk. And we're fortunate to have David on, and certainly, Commissioner, we don't expect you to have all of the answers, but as I mentioned, I'm sure CPL fans are just desperate to know a little bit more of what some of the contingency plans are. I mean, given how much this pandemic has altered the landscape of sports, what are some of the scenarios you guys have discussed? I know, and not to compare the CPL in going into year 2 to Major League Baseball or the NHL, we've seen some of those leagues talk about things like hosting tournaments in a certain state where players live in isolation, just anything to get the ball rolling. So I'm curious to know what the CPL has done in terms of brainstorming any sort of ideas which might get us back to football sooner rather than later.
Well, I mean, I think in our country here, we're dealing with a couple of things. First of all, Jeff Hunt from Athletic Ottawa made a great comment early on before we postponed the training camps, let alone the season. But before that, he said, David, we're going to, knowing our country and the way that things work here, we'll get the opportunity to hit the pause button. We will not get the opportunity to hit the go button. It'll be higher powers like the government, federally and provincially, and our health officials that are going to dictate how we deal with this going forward, right? So in the meantime, I took that to heart because quite frankly, he's spot on, right, at this point in time. So I think, what we've done is we've looked at all the work we did last year with the individual communities and how we reached out to fans and supporters. And I thought we did a really good job with that last year. I thought we were a league that was able to start up that people hadn't really seen before. And we had a bit of a whiteboard. You've heard me say this before. The guys have heard me say it for sure. And so we could do different things. So we've been doing that. And whether it's the ECPL stuff that we've been doing, the Forever First series, I know on One Soccer set did the finals, the Forever First finals that was out there. We're trying to do some different things, right? Obviously, the players are individually training now. They can't even train together, but they're individually training. But they're also doing things like they're contacting fans and supporters. They're not selling tickets. They're just asking how people are. And that started with a few players' idea, and it's now graduated and it's kind of spread out to all the teams. And the feedback we've had is unbelievable. Now, are we talking about creative ideas and what should we do? Well, we're working on different scenarios for schedules, obviously. But the reality is there's so many permutations to this thing. Until you really know, I wonder at times whether you're just being ineffective in trying to do this, right? Because the one thing that I know for sure on this is I've never seen something where, and I came out of a business world where we had to be on top of things all the time, right? And we dealt with SARS and we dealt with MERS and we dealt with some of the things that were out there at the time and all the pandemic planning. And I've been through that a number of times in my past life, but never had to really deal with it happening. And the one thing I did know is nothing moved as quickly as this has, right? And so as opposed to things changing weekly, this is changing daily and sometimes hourly. And so to try and anticipate what's happening, I think it's a bit of a mug's game. I said to somebody the other day, if you can tell me what's going to happen in the next 12 hours, then I need you to go pick stock for me, because I think we could do really well. And I'm joking a little bit, but I'm absolutely serious. You can't outguess this thing. It really boils down to what are we prepared to do in this country to do the one thing that they know will knock it down, and that is isolate ourselves and let them get a hold of this. Right? I'm buoyed by the fact that now all of a sudden there's talk starting to happen for the first time in the last few days, or at least it feels that way with me, that healthcare professionals are now involved about talking about how do they deal with, I'll call it cure, but not necessarily cure, but how are they going to, how they're advancing on that, right? And what they can do. So it's, we're not looking at doing a number of things. Now, having said that, there are some great creative ideas that are coming out of the league, because we've got some great creative people at the league office. And frankly, we've got some great creative people at the club level. The issue will always be, though, is we're a big country. It requires travel. The reality is sport works best with fans, right? And so now all of a sudden, how do you bring that into the mix? So I think the right thing to do is be ready, which I think we will. We had the advantage of getting into our training camps ahead of time. Players have stayed fit. Now we see what happens from here on in.
Well, it's important to not pretend like you have a crystal ball, and I think you do bring up a good point that not just the CPL, a lot of leagues are at the mercy of the reliable information we're getting from the World Health Organization and governmental health organizations. However, you do have to plan, obviously. You can't just sit there and wait for 2 months and say, okay, they've given us the green light, now let's figure out what to do. Mm-hmm. So having said that, do you have different scenarios, or are you working on different ideas where you say, okay, if we're back in August, this is how we might play out. If we have to wait till September, this is how the schedule might play out, because you were excited about a new scheduling format that looked to be pretty effective this year. So are you preparing for different windows of time and how long you may have to complete this season?
Yeah, we've done a couple of different scenarios. The key thing for us, though, is understanding it's about match play and how many match days we can get in, right? That's what it boils down to. Some great things that we did this year, obviously, was by changing the schedule into a single table format. That's helped us quite a bit, because it's given us maximum flexibility going forward, no matter when we choose to start. We also pushed a little earlier in the season, as you know, right, from our inaugural match last year being the 27th of April, and of course clubs playing, the following day and the next week, right, to early April. And we were able to eliminate midweek games, and because of an eighth team, again, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good at times, but you bring in an eighth team and all of a sudden 6 match days disappear from the schedule because it's a balanced schedule. So we have room, right? Because we literally eliminated a ton of games, midweek games in the fall and the spring. but also even in the summertime because of the 8 teams. So we have flexibility. So we did so many iterations of our schedule as we were planning for this, because remember, we had to go into the year thinking 7 teams and then 8 teams.
Right.
So 2 going at the same time. So we've done a lot of it. And don't forget, we also play in 3 stadiums where CFL football teams play. So that gets brought into the mix as well. No,
Kurt, there's certainly a lot of creative minds in the CPL, but we know that you like to put some feelers out, try different theories, and you're always listening and reading on different ideas. So what are some of the more interesting ideas you have heard about how the CPL schedule could look? And then we'll get the commissioner's reaction to that.
You make me sound like I'm so well read, Adam Jenkins. I appreciate that.
That's what I'm here for.
No, Commissioner. I mean, not holding the CPL to anything, and obviously there's a lot of moving parts, and depends on, first of all, if we get going and what month that is. But leagues like the NBA, for instance, where whispers of them going into one city and playing out the season. Obviously, that's not possible for the CPL. The EPL, the Premier League, was considering, well, maybe we'll just have a really big playoff, over the span of a month and sort things out that way. You talked about things being creative on your end. Can you just maybe give us a few ideas of how creative they are, or some of the things you're thinking about?
Oh no! So it's not so much what we're thinking about. I'm watching what's happening, Kurt, around the world, and some of the ideas that are out there. Right? I mean, people are talking about this idea the NBA has about doing something in Las Vegas. You've all the way to Dana White with a private island. Right?
Yeah.
I don't have a private island, right? So, unfortunately, but so I think people are trying to get there. I really worry about the no supporter, no fan scenarios, because we all know that it's sports. It's so important to have live supporters, right? Now, obviously, in a pinch, you would try to do it. We all remember Forge going down to Honduras, right? And no fans in the stand, right?
Yeah.
For that second leg of that CONCACAF matchup, and that was not. And we've all saw European games where clubs have had bans and no fans allowed. It's not a great atmosphere at all, right? It's very, very difficult. I wouldn't want to be a broadcaster doing that, because it's very, to me, there's a I wouldn't say it's a very still, it's lifeless to a certain degree, right?
I saw a story today. It might have been fake. I'm always worried about that these days. But the Belarusian league is actually putting mannequins in their stands. So I'm guessing as one social, yeah.
Well, yeah, that was.
I thought you were going to say blow up dolls there for a second.
Yeah.
That was a Saturday hangout, Commissioner, not for Friday.
That was going to be my next question, Commissioner, because you see different leagues doing different things around the world. The Bundesliga is coming back in closed stadiums, but then I was reading an owner of an English lower league club yesterday who said that for them, coming back to empty stadiums with all the costs of executing a match day without the income of a match day would be extremely difficult for them to do. So is playing in front of fans an option on the table, at least, even if an undesirable one, or would you like to steer clear from that, do you think?
I would say, Oliver, you're bang on, right? Like let's be honest, right? Live sport is very important. Like, here's the deal: no fans, no supporters, no revenue, no game, right? Like no business, right? And I don't mean to be crass, but sport is in when you get to the professional ranks, it's a business, right? It is a business, and so you have to balance the two. So that type of scenario is very difficult to make work from an economic perspective, and it's not even that we've said, well, come on, we're going to play. You come to the stadium, and people aren't coming. Sports have been told you can't have anybody there. It's wrong. It's not good for people's health and everything else. So I think, you've got to take this very seriously. It's been proven so far that it is a communicable thing. We cannot, we can't ignore that. So yeah, I do worry about the empty stands approach, but I wouldn't say never to anything, right? You can't. I think you'd be foolish to wall yourself off and say, no, this is the only thing we can do.
Mm-hmm.
And Kurt, for people who may not know, certainly you are one of our analysts. You are in giving your opinion all the time, especially with your journalism background, but you also are in terms of the organization, you're in those meetings a lot of the times leading our content process. So I want to further that question with you. Aside from the atmosphere, which is usually the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about playing in front of an empty stadium, what are some of the logistical concerns and things that Onesoccer and our parent company MediaPro have discussed on how we could make that work as effectively as possible, should it be necessary?
In terms of logistics, I'm going to leave that up to the production side of things. I'm more on the editorial and content side. But in terms of that, Commissioner, would it be selfish of me to think that by playing behind closed doors, not only do we get to show the great productions that Onesoccer puts on, but I'm kind of salivating at the opportunity to potentially have the CPL be one of the first leagues back, if at all possible, and bring all those eyeballs to us, even if it is just on Onesoccer, which would boost the channel. But at the same time, if the CPL, is the first sport in Canada going again, there's got to be a huge upside there, right?
Yeah, listen, it's not selfish of you for you to ask for that, but I want every day to be Christmas, and I'm not getting that either. So it is what it is, right? There's nothing wrong with asking and pushing for it, Kurt, and being creative. I mean, I love the creativity. I want to find out how you're going to get all the mannequins.
Yeah, but even before we had to shut things down, and everybody did, and the CPL had to announce it was postponing the start of the season, I was thinking, man, if there's a way that we can just keep this going and be a league that's still operating, it'd be real special to be able to bring all those eyeballs to us. Now, then, of course, I understand that we couldn't do that, but if you're the first ones back, just all the attention the league could get as a result of that.
Yeah, there's no doubt, but again, you balance it with the health and safety part of it, Kurt. Right?
Yeah.
Day, you still have teammates and players playing together. I don't. As much as I worry about the public and the fans and supporters who've been phenomenal for us, I also worry about our players and our coaching staff and our technical staffs at the clubs. Right? So there's still going to have to be people there, and I, becoming gravely ill would be too many. Right?
Yeah.
So. I think it's one of those things where it's if it's risk, it's not worth it right at this point in time.
Commissioner, this is the worst case scenario that I'm about to ask you about, but I am curious because based on our geography, based on the fact we play outside, we're not playing in dome stadiums at this point. Is there a cutoff day? Because we obviously can't start the season in November. We can't start the season in October. Have you had those conversations, and can you shed light on at what point would it just not be feasible if this thing doesn't turn around?
No, I don't think we've gotten to that point yet, though, Adam, because, honestly, like tomorrow would be our first match. So as of tomorrow,
Yes.
We're going to cancel matches, right? So we've got a long way to go before that. And just look at what's happened in the last 3 or 4 days, right? Listen, at the end of the day, guys, you guys know this as much as I do. We all have to have hope in this world. It's a very dark place, right? We're not going to be like that, right? So there's an opportunity here, and we can adjust and we can adapt and we can be flexible. That's the key. We are constricted by the fact that we have weather that's that we have to deal with in the latter stage of any schedule we put together. But still, there's lots there, and there's lots of creative ideas out there. Like Kirk said before. Kirk said, we have the opportunity to do some different things if we put our minds to it. And listen, we've got great partners at Onesoccer with the MediaPro people. They see everything around the world. I'm sure they've got lots of creative ideas too. We just have to find the right ones if it comes to that. But right now, we're still focused on the fact that we potentially could play this year as long as we get control of this.
So it is safe to say, though, that at some point it's not feasible. We just hope we don't get to that point.
Well, absolutely, it's that way for everyone, right? There comes a point but I do believe, though, that we're probably in a better position than most out there because of the fact that we're new, we're small, we don't have the same amount of moving parts, right? If you're the National Hockey League with all those teams and your cross borders, right? Or if you're the NBA, or if you're the if you're MLB, they've got other issues. They got international borders to cross, right? So there's issues that they have that we don't have. So and a lot more teams in a much different schedule, right? So there, in some ways we we are at a, we've got one hand tied behind our back, but in others we're more flexible and adaptable than others. Is that fair?
That's fair. One of the positive stories too, let's lighten the mood a little bit. One of the positive stories heading into 2020 was Atletico Ottawa, and it was a surprise to many, certainly a surprise to us, a surprise to you. As you mentioned earlier, we started this season planning for 7 again, but now we have 8. Certainly a tough situation for them to try and build a club on short notice now in the middle of a pandemic. However, we've been asking fans for their questions, and we'll try and get to as many as possible. One of the things we keep hearing over and over again is continued expansion, because obviously there are lots of markets that want in on the CPL. How has this pandemic and this closure on 2020 for now affected plans for future expansion? Because you've been liberal in the past by saying we want to expand when the time is right. So how has this changed the expansion plans, if at all?
No change. We're still, you got to be open for business, even if it's virtually, right? You can still communicate with people. You can still talk to the people that are out there. I will say this to you about Ottawa. Went into 2020 hoping for the best, but planning for potentially 7 and keeping our mouth shut about the possibility that we had a potential 8 team. I will say that when it was Atletico Madrid that came in, and when Atletico, when they said, look, we want to go there, and the story, it started off as a dinner, and obviously with our friends from Media Pro, and then it morphed into friendship, and then it turned into, we're really interested in what you're doing. To me, the opportunity became when they stepped up and said, we'd like to do this, and it of course went to the nation's capital when they did it. To me, that's the good housekeeping seal of approval on your league. When a club of that size says, we like what you're doing, we'd like to participate, and we'd like to even help you guys make it better and stronger. And so you can imagine that's also spurred other conversations around the globe. I've been asked this many times. What about what if other clubs approached you, or other leagues? And I've always said, if it fits their strategy and it fits our strategy and the two work together, we would be foolish to say no. Right. And so we're having lots of discussions with people. Everybody's dealing with the same thing. Right. So, it's everybody looks at it, 50 years from now, people will look back and say, well, that was, it happened. But and you can't call it a bump in the road. Let's be honest. It's not a bump in the road. It was something that just took precedence over everything else. And we've had events like that in the history of mankind. Right. Obviously. So it's another one of those. But people will look back, and it'll be a footnote in history, and it'll be something that happened. But we move on. That's what we do.
Yeah, it certainly feels more like a sinkhole in the road than a bump in the road right now.
Well, that's right now, because we're all dealing with it, right? But from an expansion perspective, we are 100% focused on expansion. Our next goal is how do we get to 10 teams, and then from there, we're still calling out 16 teams, ideally 16 teams by 2026. And it's there for us. You can see, you guys feel the wave. You have to. You're in this business every day, like I am. You can feel the momentum around this sport in our country. It's there.
Do you have any fear that even if the interest and the momentum is still there, it just might not be practically possible to pull it off for a new team or two in 2021 at this stage?
2021 could be more difficult, but not necessarily. I mean, no one thought that we could do it for 2020, Oliver, right? Mm-hmm. Now you could say, well, David, that team hasn't started playing yet. That's fine. But they were running 150 miles an hour to get ready. Maybe the only silver lining out of any of this has been it's given them a little bit extra time to do some great stuff with building the club. But no one thought it could be done in 2020, right? So. I won't say no to anything. Kurt knows me. I will move mountains if we have to, and if we're able to.
Yeah, David, I just wanted to get one more in on expansion. I'm sure this topic's been exhausted, but the one thing that Major League Soccer eventually started to practice was in a way they were almost playing cities off against each other, right? So you've been very open about which areas of the country, and even broadly which cities, as many as a dozen to 16 cities interested in a team. But is there going to come a point where you get down to that 4 or 5 or half dozen that you think could be ready to go, and then in a way you build that momentum from saying, we're not going to tell you who's next, but it's going to be one of these cities.
Yeah,
Or is there something preventing you from doing that?
Well, no, I don't. No, not preventing us, but you also don't want to. There's a lot of moving parts. You and I have had this conversation, and you've heard me rattle off all this. Reality is, eventually over time it whittles down. You're more regionally, right? Kirk, that I'm very focused on Quebec. It's great to say we're coast to coast as a Canadian league. Truly, we won't be a fully Canadian league unless we get a team in Quebec. So Quebec is very important to us. That's not a secret to anybody. But we also need to be in the prairies as well, right? So we've got to get into Saskatchewan as another area that we have to be into. I believe there's room in the West Coast because it's one of the fastest growing regions in the country. And then I still think there's room in Ontario, but you have to be strategic in the way that you do it, right? And so, and don't kid yourself. There's people that are knocking on the door from the East Coast as well, right?
Yeah.
So these are all good things to have. Lots of room for it.
Good.
We know you're not shy on a lot of things, but you're certainly not shy on giving your opinions on how you think the CPL could improve and how you think the CPL could be better.
Yes.
You're also particularly proud about a certain point. Oh, I know.
He's rubbing his hands at him. Like, seriously.
David, we do production meetings every single day. I'm very used to the hand rubbing, and it's not because he's practicing cleanliness. Let me tell you that. Kurt is particularly proud about the playoff format, thinking that he may have spurred on the CPL to consider this decision, to which we came now to the current format. So, Kurt, I'll ask you, with the commissioner here, do you think the CPL is listening to you?
I know the CPL listens to me because I receive calls from the head of communications there sometimes asking me why I've said something or talked about something. So of course they're listening, and I thought it was a great move going to the playoff format, just because I just feel like teams need to be involved longer. And I think if you have 8 teams chasing 3 playoff spots, I think it's going to ensure that even in month 5 or 6 of the season, that there's going to be a lot more teams involved. But I guess, Commissioner, was that kind of the thinking there? And is it still possible, even with a shortened season, to have that same playoff format, or would that playoff format be in jeopardy? And do you listen to me?
Oh yeah, I listen to you, Kurt. I think that's why you get phone calls once in a while. But no, listen. Like, at the end of the day, and I've said this publicly. We heard it from lots of fans, including yourself, about let's change. Maybe it's time to change this up, right? And when we looked at it, the advantages far outweighed the disadvantage of changing something after year 1. So that's why we made the change. Does it keep more teams in it longer? I think so, for sure, because obviously 3 make it through. I do know that I had our group in the office go through the format last year, and I had them, based on the results, redo the standings as if it had been a single table the whole year. And I think 5 or 6 of the teams, 5 of them for sure, were still in it with about 5 or 6 weeks left in the schedule. So to actually make it to number 2, right? We remember York lost 2 games in a row that they shouldn't have. They would have been right in there. It would have been horseshoes and hand grenades, Kurt, if they'd have won those 2 games, right? So very interesting. But having said all that, maybe Forge doesn't rest a couple players at the end. So you can play all the what ifs if you want. But I think the new format is good. I also believe that in a single table format, no matter what, if we're delayed and how far we're delayed, it's still gonna be available for us, because we're not playing this. If we were in a spring and a summer fall, it would be a problem, right, for us. Yeah. So we have maximum flexibility with this new format.
We're nearing the bottom of the hour, so we've sort of focused on the broader picture of the CPL to start. And with these Hangouts, sometimes we have a certain player or coach where the conversation is very narrowly focused on one club for an hour. With the commissioner, we're lucky and able to talk about more than one club. In fact, we're going to get to all the clubs right now. So we've asked Kurt and Ollie to come up with one question per club that we're going to pose to the commissioner. We'll start on the West Coast, and we'll start with you, Ollie, with your question on Pacific.
Yeah, Pacific FC. So there's a lot to like here at Westhill Stadium, and the look and feel of it, the new stand, the size of the stadium now, and also the overall investment in that community that's happening. It's probably one of the leading clubs in your league as in those terms. However, there is this one persisting issue, which is the hydro pole at Westhill Stadium and how that impacts the broadcasts of games. So I just wondered if there was any update on that and how you've looked at solving that problem.
So interestingly enough, before in February, we were out and we met with the mayor. We've talked with the premier in the past. We're actively working to improve that. We had Media Pro Oscar Lopez, the CEO, was with us as well. So we've been very clear that we have to fix this problem because it does affect broadcast and obviously the look and feel of the game. They've committed to make changes not only to lighting but also to try and find this pole. The problem with the pole is it's a pretty big move, but they've committed to get changed all over. I don't know, but we know that that's a key thing for us. Soccer was going to take. And they also said the same thing. So they gave the same feedback to the city. It's not really the club; it's the city that controls it. And of course, the province, because the province, I don't know if you know this, but they own the right of way on those poles. So it's it's partly the premier that has to kind of push buttons as well. And then of course you've got BC Hydro. So there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on this one. Having said that, we're looking at different ways that we can make it better, and then how do we make the permanent change there? But they know it has to be done because otherwise the league has got to put their we've got to draw a line in the sand, so to speak, here and say, look, this has got to get fixed, or we're going to have to move the situation. And I will be honest with you, the city of Langford and Mayor Stu out there, Stu Young, they've been fantastic and they are very supportive and they want to get this done. This is not about them trying to slow it down.
Yeah.
The only people that would seriously complain about a permanent relocation of that hydro pole is a certain very active Twitter account that may have to change its name. Okay, let's move a little bit east. Kurt, a question from you from the team on your hat.
Yeah, shout out to the hydro pole blog. So it's, moving on to Cavalry. Really interesting club, Commissioner. A club that is backed by fantastic ownership, as you know. In terms of the ambition rankings of this league, I see Cavalry as having just an immense amount of runway to move to another level, to move to CPL 2.0 and then 3.0 faster than anybody. What can we expect from them just in terms of improving the ground? Is there further investment to come in a training facility on site at Spruce Meadows? I mean, how much does that excite you that you have a group like that it seems could take this league to another level within the next few years, just given the level of investment and who they have backing them?
Yeah, I think, there's no doubt. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, the Southern family, under the leadership of Linda Heathcock, they have shown the propensity to be prepared to spend the money, Kurt, as they need to here, right? They put a tremendous amount of investment into Spruce Meadows to bring together what I thought was one of the unique kind of places to go and watch a game. Like, I mean, it was. The games that I was out there was lots of people there. It was entertaining, and it was entertaining before and after the match, and during the match, and at halftime when you wanted to get up and walk around. So they've got a great spot. I think in talking with them, they've got lots of runway. They've got a tremendous amount of land. We know that, so they can do whatever they want. I think it'll be when do they want to do that? Right now they have enough, right, and so. I don't know that relationship where it stands and how that would be affected financially. So, but they have lots of runway. They are an extremely ambitious club. I think that it starts and stops at the top, both with Linda, but also Ian Allison and of course Tommy Wilden. I mean, Tommy is a winner. Like he is. There's no second place for Tommy. There's first, and then there's everybody else. And so you got to love that, because in sports, that's what it's all about. Like, no one remembers who finished the second; they only remember who wins, right? And so he's got that attitude. He's got a good system that he has with the club. As you can see, he's taken and made some changes into the club this year. He's building on success, right? And so yeah, I expect him to do very well. I mean, I don't think people thought that any of our clubs would beat an MLS team, and they, of course, were the first to do that.
Mm-hmm. We'll try and get to some of our YouTube questions and Twitter questions after we go coast to coast. So just a reminder, if you do have any questions that we haven't already addressed for the commissioner, we welcome them. We'll try and get as many of them in as possible. So use the YouTube chat, use Twitter, and our producers will send along any pertinent ones in a short while. But let's get back to the CPL coast to coast questions. To Ollie, your question on the other Albertan side with FC Edmonton.
Yeah, so this is a club I have a bit of a soft spot for. I think Jeff Paulus really cares about that community and bringing through young players into the first team. However, if I'm being completely honest with you, Commissioner, I think that stadium in Edmonton has maybe fallen behind the standards that have been set elsewhere in the league last year. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you think that club can kind of grow its attendances going forwards?
Yeah, there's no doubt it needs some work, and you know the cities we've had some discussions with them. There's unfortunately not a lot of cities are stepping up and doing what they're doing in Langford these days, right? And so there's work that has to be done there. I do believe that the structure of that stadium is good, but it needs to be just done a little bit better. And to me, it's a perfect example of what modular type building can how it can enhance a field that's already the structure that already has a structure that has. I mean, grandstand is there, but it needs work. You know, better on the other side. These are all things that Tom Fath recognizes, and so you know we're working on that. We'll have to work on that in the future. But right now, I need more fans in the stands. Right, we need more supporters there. So that's the big thing, Oliver. But no, I'm not going to sit here and disagree with you. I'd like to get more people out and an even better experience there. I've been to a few games there where it's been a lot of fun, but we need more of that. And I think Tom and Jeff Paulus would say the same thing.
Yeah.
Mentioned earlier, Commissioner, that there are 3 clubs playing in a CFL building, and it's a brand new league isn't just going to grab the heart of a community in first year, second year, maybe even 5 years. It takes time to build that. But I know Kurt was wondering about our first club that plays in a CFL venue with Valour.
Yeah, so Winnipeg surprised me, to be honest, this year. Rob Gale had been building it up as all the interest out there, and I got to admit, I didn't believe him. But when the season rolled around, you know, there were some nights there that, you know, there were 8,000 fans, and it looked really good on the broadcast, and you could tell there was energy in the building. So what is, you know, it's the same kind of question for Forge. Like what does it take to get you know, a Valour to that next level, to get that additional fan base? Is it just a matter of results? What are the challenges maybe they're facing right now in Winnipeg?
Well, I think a lot of it, Kurt, has to do with it has to do with results, right? Let's be honest. I thought, you know, knowing Rob Gale and his staff and knowing some of the players he brought in, I was expecting much more out of them. And you know, they ran into a dry spell there and it went on a long time. And that really hurt things a lot, right? Now, granted, they still had lots of fans there, and they were entertaining games. The games that I was there to see Valour play, they were entertaining games. But they can do more for sure. There's lots of interest in football or soccer in Winnipeg and in that area, call it the general area around that in Manitoba. So they have the opportunity. They've got a good fan base and a following. They've got an excellent organization that's their parent, being the Blue Bombers. They are also, you know, they're on a winning roll, right, with the Bombers. So, you know, I think it boils down to you got to win more games, right? When you win more games, that's going to follow, and you keep building it. There's a lot of seats in that stadium, so it takes time.
Yeah, I was gonna follow up on that, and it was one of the people have been talking about this in Major League Soccer since the beginning. Is, you know, can a club survive in such a big stadium? And I think the answer is yes, just based on what I've seen at Forge and Valour. Because I think even if you know, get 10,000 fans into those venues, it's actually quite a good atmosphere, right? So were you satisfied in those questions being answered? I mean, the first leg of the final at Tim Hortons Field, the environment inside there was fantastic, I felt.
Yeah, you know, you've got to build towards that, right? Like at the end of the day, if they're getting, 4, 5, 6,000 people, that's fine, but we've got to get to the 8 and the 10, right? And then
Yeah.
if you can consistently get up there in those numbers, and the clubs know that, that's what they're after, but you have to build that. You have to earn it. I mean, how many years did it take the MLS to figure it out, right? That sometimes playing in these big stadiums, as much as it can be an advantage, you get all the amenities and everything else, the disadvantage is there's a lot of seats there, right? So it'll work really hard to do it. And so even the clubs are looking at how do we position everybody, how do we get the fans to sit together, is it better to do that versus being spread out through the stadium, those types of things. But yeah, it's there's great advantages to being part of those stadiums. Then the other side of it is you got to work your tail off to make them fill up, because let's be honest, you go to Halifax with HFX Wanderers and you look at that small stadium, and with 6,000 to 6,500 people in there, I mean it's the best night out you're going to have.
It's interesting you bring up Halifax, because that was the club we were going to go to next. And Ollie's got a question. We talked about expansion a little bit earlier, but Ollie wants to push this message just a bit in a different direction.
Sure.
Yeah, so we've talked about Halifax plenty, just the success story it's been for this league, and maybe surprising in some ways compared to other markets. I want to ask, how much does Halifax as a market kind of become almost a checklist for you when you're assessing new expansion markets? And what are the key things that you think have worked there?
Well, I certainly, when I look at Halifax, I think the greater Halifax area is about 500,000 people. So population, you can check the box on population a little bit there. It kind of gives you an idea. And in some of the work that we've done with some of the folks out of Accelerate Sports in the US that do a lot of the USL and a lot of the MLS type work for them, they talk about this catchment area of about 500,000 people is kind of the sweet spot, 400 to 500,000, right? Halifax does that. They also Derek Martin and his crew there have done an excellent job of building a community organization. So when you look at that, they not that any of the other clubs haven't, but there's no doubt that the supporters group and the fans in Halifax, they have embraced that. Now, they don't have the other professional sports that some of the other cities have, but the reality is they've done a great job at it. You walk in the downtown area, if you're out in the malls in Halifax, you hear people having discussions walking in front of you about the Wanderers. Mm-hmm. Those are things when you check the boxes, you start to see that type of thing. And they also, if you look at, I went around to all the clubs and said, okay, talk to me about all the community activation that you've done for 2019. And Halifax, HFX Wanderers, I mean, it was 4 or 5 pages long, the amount of work that they did. They fully embraced the fact that their players had to be out in the market and out in the public, talking to people, visiting hospitals, doing the right things. I had somebody said to me who lives out there that I know, obviously I know a lot of people out there through Hortons days, but they said to me, Dave, there's not a weekend that doesn't go by that I don't see players in uniform in the malls, in the city, right? So they've taken it seriously. It's more than just, you have to build the club, not just on the pitch, but you got to do it off the pitch as well. And it's everything you do. So I think they've done a lot of that. So Oliver, to answer your question, they are a very good blueprint and especially for what we want to do in Canada. And the opportunity is, how do you then take a modular stadium, maybe up it a few notches, and how do you use that to morph to, go from a 6,500, how do you get into then 8,500 to 10 to 12,000, right? Let's, when you look at European football, you know this, but when you look at European football, once you get past the big 5 or 6, the next stage down, like when number 7, the average attendance is about 10 or 11,000.
Right.
You're into Portugal, you're into Sweden, you're into Scotland, you're into Turkey, places like that, right? That are in that range. That's their average, right? Yeah. And some of them are dragged up by big clubs that perennially go to Champions League, right? And are playing in Europe. So we know where the target is, and that's we have to work towards that. So I think Halifax gives us an opportunity to model it, understand it, blueprint clubs coming in.
Mm-hmm. Carrying on the conversation of community support and facilities with the York 9 situation, and Kurt, this one goes to you.
Yeah, York 9 I hold close to my heart just because I see the possibilities up in that region just with all the soccer that's played and the love of the game. Obviously, in year one, I believe they finished bottom in attendance. But what I know is that different markets need different things, and we've seen it south of the border and the way MLS has gone about growing and doing different things in different markets. And some of those markets, for instance, maybe at Kansas City where I grew up, it took building a new venue to really revitalize that club. And now they have 20,000 fans at every single game, whereas 10 years ago they had 8,000 fans at every game, if that, at Arrowhead Stadium, the NFL stadium. So I guess my question is when York 9 was announced, it was talked about that, a stadium plan was in place 3 to 5 years down the road. Do you think that is what is needed in that market, is to have a 10,000 seat venue or whatever it is to rally around and really show that marketplace that the team is there to stay and it's real and here's our home. Not to take anything away from York Lions Stadium and that venue, but is it going to take moving somewhere else to really jumpstart things there?
So my personal reaction to that, Kurt, is that the very first thing we need to do is, and I think the guys at York 9 would say this, stepped a little bit in the way that they approach the community and how to go about creating fans, right? And so that's a big issue. So with Angus McNabb coming in there now, who's a footballer, who understands it from a business perspective, he's got a lot of different ideas about how to create, it to be that kind of, games at York 9 should be, that should be an event. People, they've got to think about, oh yeah, we're going, that's where we're going, right? That's our, making it a tradition. He's done some great stuff from a social media perspective, reconnecting with the communities up there. There's no shortage of population. There's no shortage of fans, but the connection has to be there, right? And so they've doubled down on a lot of that. I was really looking at, and I'm looking forward to see what they can do this year to move that needle, because I too, like you, it's near and dear to my heart as well. I'm a season ticket holder there, right? Yeah. I'm up there with my boys all the time. So I like the venue. Like, the venue's not the biggest issue. You are right in that there will come a point in time, if you got to the point of where you were with Sporting KC and you were at 8,000 fans, then that could be the bigger issue, right? But I don't think we're there. Like, if we get to that, 6,000-7,000 fans there, then that could be an issue, but not until then. I think we need to ingrain or create a tradition, make it a destination. If you remember, I know we all watched it. I was in the stadium when they tied 2-2 with Montreal Impact, the eventual Canadian Championship winners, on that night. I think it was a Wednesday night. I think it was, but I was standing there watching that game, and when we were, I noticed we were winning 2-1. I mean, as my grandmother would say, my arse was making buttons. Like seriously, I couldn't believe this was about to happen. But we remember the atmosphere in that stadium, right? And so we could have been on the moon. It didn't matter. Everybody was there. Everybody was engaged. Everybody was literally, our hearts were at our throats, right? So I think you can achieve that. And then it's Kirk, to your point, how do you get it to the next level after that, right? And so I think we're both saying the same things. Mine is maybe just will take a little bit longer to get to where you want to go.
Commissioner, just a quick one from me as a season's ticket holder. Are you going to miss Yorkie?
When they no, I'm not actually.
That's enough.
When they came up with the cartoon to Yorkie Went Home, I thought, okay, there's some young person is brilliant there. So.
Yeah, I think everyone across the league gave him a round of applause for that. All right, Oliver, to you and to Forge.
Probably loved it the most. He probably was happy that Yorkie went home more than anybody.
I'm not a fan. I'm not that big a fan of mascots, but.
All right. Flat over to you and Forge.
Yeah, so this is a theme we've touched upon, talking about Valour and some of the other clubs we've already spoken about. But I guess if you can just expand on how you think a club like Forge can go from that crowd size of maybe 5,000 to 7,000 and get to that next level of 8 to 10, and how quickly that could happen.
I think it really boils down to, Oliver, they have to continue to do the work in the community.
Mhm.
That's what has to happen here, right? It's tough work, right? You got to get it done, but the way you get it done is through the community, and it's not about it's engaging with the community, and especially the soccer community, in Hamilton, Wentworth, and everything that's around there. There's a tremendous amount of soccer playing there. It's got to be a family event. It's got to be something make it's that family tradition, similar to what they've achieved with the Ticats over 100 years, right? Or
Mhm.
however long it's been. But so it's doable. They have a great facility, but they've got to get people there. It doesn't hurt that they won last year.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? It doesn't hurt that they won last year. So I think immediately it ups the interest level. And if you watch what the club is doing now around the community, they're doing quite a bit there now, and they need to do more. Bobby knows this, Costa knows this, Matt Afnick knows it. Like, I'm very clear about this. Everyone has to do more when it comes to engaging, right? And I put it as much on the players as anybody. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, when you're playing in this league, you've decided to be a professional in this league. You really are. You've taken on an apprenticeship. You're honing your skills, and your skills just aren't on the pitch. You are building a brand for yourself, and you're building yourself into a professional. You have to understand what goes into that, and I think the league's learning that as a whole, and the players are learning it as well.
Mhm. An interesting thing with Forge as well was that they didn't, although they won in the league, they didn't have that run in the Canadian Championship that I think was a real flashpoint for York and Cavalry and teams like that. So there's a bit of potential there, I think, as well for them.
For sure. And yeah, it's unfortunate, right? Right, we have Cavalry and Forge run up against each other right away,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? And
I
oh, for sure, I'm sure you did. Uh, so did I. It was good football, but listen, at the end of the day, that's a tough one, right? You get a draw like that, and
Mhm.
you're going to lose one of your better teams. But then York steps up and gives
Yeah,
us fantastic entertainment. And quite frankly, Wanderers, I mean, they're up to, like, I'm in Montreal watching the second leg. York should already be up 2-0 against the
yeah,
Impact, right?
yeah,
And then I get tapped on the shoulder, and somebody tells me that Wanderers are up 2-0 in the first half in
yeah.
Ottawa. So thank God I didn't do any dancing that anyone got me on video, but that's what keeps everybody going, right? For a moment there, we came within an eyelash of having three teams advance.
yeah,
Mhm.
it was a great tournament. Great tournament last year.
I think
For,
it's
for the
phenomenal for Canadian soccer, Kurt. I know you said this before.
Yeah.
The Canadian Championship, it does so much for the game because it really brings more people into it, and great competition is what it is. Great competition.
for the sake of time, we're not going to talk Ottawa today just because there's so many things we could ask that we want to give them the respect of more time to really go over it. And for the viewers, just so you know, we are working on getting a member of the Atletico Ottawa on the show in the coming weeks. But Kurt, I know you have a question for David, not about a Canadian situation, but an international situation.
Yeah, yeah. I don't like feeling like I'm at the kids' table, and I think sometimes in Canada, in especially in this confederation, it's like we're at the kids' table, right? Because you have Major League Soccer and LigaMX working very, very closely, doing leagues cups, and working together in terms of CONCACAF Champions League qualification, and that tournament is basically just based around two federations. Commissioner Don Garber at his MLS Cup had mentioned it potentially being a missed opportunity, not working closer with the CPL. I know right now we're just trying to make sure we save a 2020 season, but how important is it that eventually we get at that table in New York or wherever, and we're there with MLS, with Liga MX, with the big boys?
Yeah, I think Kurt, you're 100% right, and I don't feel like we're at the kids' table at this point in time. I do believe though that we have to earn our stripes a little bit more, right?
Yeah.
And so we've done a good job in year one. I do believe that there's an opportunity there to create some discussion amongst the leagues. I think it's interesting now with a couple of players coming up from Liga MX that are good players with good pedigree. Pacific and Ottawa both
Yep.
brought them up
Mhm.
right there. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out, because that's the first two that we. It's certainly with the MLS, same thing. I think the Canadian teams would like to see a relationship started at one point or another. But at the end of the day, out of respect, it has to start in New York, right? With Don Garber and myself to a certain degree, as well as others within the two leagues. So the timing will be right. It's going to be there. It's not about us versus them. It's we're all in this together, right? And this is about taking, when you look to 2026 and you look at Mexico and you look at the United States, you look at Canada, this is an unbelievable opportunity for us to take football in this part of the world and leapfrog it forward, because we're all playing catch up versus the rest of the world when it comes to soccer or football, right? They've got a big head start on all of us. Don't look at us. Even just with what you see in the United States, right? It's been a long road for 25 years for the MLS already. It's unbelievable that it's been that long, right?
Yep.
So I think you're bang on. That's what we need to do. It's all about timing, right? When's the right time? But there's more and more talk going on about it now, and it's a lot easier for us to think about now that we've actually got our league up and running. And obviously, people are very distracted by 2020. There's no doubt about that. But I'd like to think that we're all learning from each other at this point.
Only a few minutes left, so we're going to turn the questions from the pundits to the fans. First one comes from Jonathan on Twitter. He says, when could we potentially expect to see CPL clubs develop academies?
Well, it's an interesting that's an interesting conversation, because I have some very strong opinions about academies, and Kurt knows that. We probably
how many successful players have come from Major League Soccer academies?
So I can tell you right now, out of 100% of the players, which is almost 600 players in Major League Soccer academies, it's actually 2.9% of the players of those 600 have actually gotten first team real minutes in MLS teams.
Yeah, so
there's a problem with academies in North America, in my opinion, because they have not proven to work, and so there's John Herdman and I have had this conversation. My attitude is, let's build a better mousetrap. In other words, let's look to other formats to see if there's something different to be done. And you're hearing it in other leagues too, right? In the English Premier League today, I think Brentford is within 1 or 2 points of potentially qualifying for the Premier League next year, and they do not operate an academy.
Yeah.
And they stopped operating their academy. And Oliver, you probably know this because Oliver Gage is all over this.
Yeah.
They were having the big clubs with all the cash come in and take their players, and it's where they do the heavy lifting on the development, but then the stars in the eyes from the players want to go play for the Chelseas of the world, the Man Cities of the world, right?
Well, how many players came from League One and actually had success in the CPL? I mean, wouldn't League One be considered, one of the most successful and largest academy systems, if you will?
So between 40 and 50 players in the CPL in its first year spent time in League One, Kurt. So 36 directly out of League One last year, but then another 9 or 10 that had spent time in League One, had gone over and played in the second or third division in Europe, and then came back to play first division in Canada.
Yeah.
So again, there's, my point was, we need to think about, is there a better mousetrap? Then should we build a better mousetrap? I'm big on that, and I will quote Joey Sputo all the time, who told me, David, I lose money in my Montreal Impact Academy. I won't tell you how much, and I make money in my Bologna FC Academy in Serie A.
Yeah.
And they're at complete opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So I think potentially a better mousetrap, but I think if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that then you spend money on the technical development side of the game. In other words, make sure that we're training people that are training the youngsters. Make sure that they are getting the right knowledge. So Oliver, to your point, making sure we have the quality people teaching this, we may have to import that to start with to get it so that it takes seed. But then once it takes seed in our own people, then we need to develop it homegrown. And so I'm not even talking about players at this point. I'm talking about the people that that are actually instructing and teaching and forming the players.
Yeah, for sure.
Time for one last question from social media. This one comes from Ringio. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Is there a timeline on bringing in domestic player, kind of a situation like that, DP caliber players?
Designated players, you mean?
Oh, designated.
Sorry, yeah, not domestic. Designated. My bad. Yeah, I'm thinking homegrown. Let's talk designated players if there's a timeline there.
No, we've not even talked about this idea. We've not even talked about the idea of designated players. No, I'm very concerned. I've watched it happen in other leagues where they've tried this and it doesn't necessarily work. If you look at all of the players that were brought into the MLS and the old NESL originally, a lot of mercenaries. It wasn't until I think David Beckham showed up that they kind of hit one out of the park a little bit, and it helped. But I don't know. I think I worry that you bring a player in, they're just like trying to finish their career or they're trying to make a step. They can be a bit of a mercenary. They immediately start looking for their next job the minute they land, right? And so you got to be careful. I like the idea of bringing young players, young international players in that want to create a lot of first team minutes. They want to build their career. They're not on the downside of their career. They're on the upside of it. And what can they add? Because they've been taught great pedigree. They've gotten great pedigree by their teaching from wherever they came from, right? And I think we need to think about how we do it and be very strategic how we do it. Yes, it's nice to have people with older heads in the dressing room. Yes, that's true. But we also have technical and staff and coaches for that. So I agree that sometimes players have a different perspective. But I don't think I wouldn't say no to anything, but we're not having any talks about any designated players at this point in time.
Well, Commissioner, it's been a very good hour. We mentioned earlier tomorrow should have been the start of the season. So CPL fans obviously anxious to get back to normalcy, anxious to get back to sport. But on behalf of them and on behalf of us, we appreciate you coming in and taking the time to answer some of those questions.
You're very welcome. Let's not forget to remind everybody about the inaugural game being.
That was what I was going to do right now. Do you want to read the promo?
That's going to be great, and I'm tuning in. That's for sure. And then obviously some of the stuff we're doing on the ECPL right now with some of the players playing the gamers, and we've got this kind of friendly match. I'm going to call it. Kurt will laugh at this, but we got a friendly match with some players from Pacific FC playing against some Werder Bremen players in a FIFA match gaming. And it is definitely the longest road trip I've ever seen when you look at Werder Bremen all the way to Victoria, British Columbia. But anyways,
let's just remind everybody that tomorrow night, in collaboration with the CPL, Onesoccer is airing the inaugural CPL match between York 9 and Forge. You can watch that at CanPL.ca and live on Onesoccer's YouTube page. I think that's at 6 p.m. So, kind of when we should have been kicking off the 2020 season, we're going to kind of look back and reflect on the 2019 season and that inaugural match. But just real quickly before we let you go, Commissioner, we do have a documentary coming out soon, and part of the focus is on that first match. But what do you remember from then? Can you reflect back? What are the emotions when you reflect back on just seeing the league kick off a year ago?
Well, it was what, Kurt, you were there. It was a fantastic day. It was a long time coming. It felt like it went over in a flash, but it was very emotional. It was a very emotional day because there was there were people rooting for us, but there were also people that didn't think we could ever do it, right? And it was a surreal moment. So we were very, very proud of the league, very proud of the clubs and what we did. And yeah, it was. There's so many moments that came into getting that off the ground, but it was very emotional. I'm sure I've seen the documentary. There's a couple of emotional minutes in there from me. So yeah. So
I think you shed a tear in there.
He does have a heart.
Great stuff. Thanks again, David. And speaking of the Onesoccer YouTube channel, we have all the archives of our previous shows Of course, our Hangouts every day, Monday to Friday, but also One Soccer Happy Hour with Andy Petrillo and Inside the Game with Gareth Wheeler. We're 3 episodes in. Alexi Lawless last night, John Herdman, Craig Forrest. We're going to continue to build that content platform. So subscribe to One Soccer on YouTube if you haven't already. Like these videos, share them with your friends. Commissioner, thanks again. For Kurt, for Ollie, I'm Adam Jenkins. Have a healthy, safe, and fun holiday weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday. Tune in tomorrow, 6 p.m. for the rewatch.
Thanks, guys. Happy Easter.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thanks, Commissioner.